But I want to move on now, and there are some hefty bits of legislation currently working their way through the Houses of Parliament, and we're expected to see the details of another one later this week when the government will introduce its long-awaited online safety bill. Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, has been writing about this today on the Conservative Home website. Take a look at the headline, How We Will Narrow the Ground for Barring Harmful Posts in the Online Safety Bill. And this is a very wide-ranging bill which is effectively attempting to limit the amount of harmful content that's online and that people are subjected to. Nikki, this is something you've been waiting for an awful long time. Are you feeling confident about what's going to come on Thursday?
Well, I'm really pleased to see that the step, I'm sorry, it has not been published quite today as we had expected, but it is definitely coming. When I was Culture Secretary, for a short period of time, my main role was to keep the process, the consultation moving forward. I recommended that Ofcom should be the regulator. I think this is just a phenomenally important step for the UK to be taking. This is a whole sector, the social media platforms, the search engines, where undoubtedly there can be a force for good, but there is also, so we just saw earlier on, Tulip Sadiq tweeting, for example, about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. I mean, that's where social media is very powerful. But equally, we see lots of harmful content. We see young women, for example, encouraged to self-harm. We see, abuse of people in public life and worse. And so I think it's really, I just think it's great that the UK has taken a step to regulate, but it's a complicated bill. It's going to take up a lot of parliamentary time. And I'm afraid there is still going to be quite a lot of scope for amendments.
One thing that you're particularly interested in is the idea of online anonymity and whether people should be allowed to be anonymous online.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult judgment call because, again, there will be some jurisdictions where actually brave people protesting, actually an anonymous account does protect. But I do think the platforms need to be asking further questions. I think they should have more details about who is opening the accounts, whether that could be linked to a credit card, whether that's to an IP address. So when there is a problem with a post or a series of posts, they know where to go. The other issue is going to be about directors' liability. At the moment, there isn't sufficient liability for senior management, and I think that's going to be a really live area for debate.
OK, Kate, just on this point of online anonymity, do you think that's right, that people should have to provide their genuine identity to the providers, to the platforms at least?
I think if you are truly afraid for your safety, if you are somebody who is protesting, if you're somebody who's a whistleblower, even handing over credit card details is going to put you off from doing so and giving us the information that we would otherwise get from you to make this world a better place. Countries that have mandated that, in places like South Korea, have seen hackers just go to town and they do manage to get these details. If you can't have real anonymity, then you are always going to be under threat of being exposed. There are trade-offs here. It is the fundamental trade-off between security and liberty. I fall on the side of liberty. I will wait to see the full bill, but I am deeply worried that this concoction between big tech and government is only going to lead to limiting our freedom of speech. This idea that things that are legal and yet harmful, which are going to be removed, taken out of public discourse, should be very worrying for anybody who believes in free speech.
Where does Labour sit on this issue of online anonymity? Your colleague Margaret Hodge says, I want social media companies like Facebook and Twitter to be able to identify everybody who has an account and uses their platforms.
I think that's absolutely right. But of course, that recognises that there will be some activists in some parts of the world that do need to have that anonymity. But as long as the social media companies are aware that it is a real person, not the bots that we are seeing and being used politically in the way that we are. I think the biggest issue, though...
Why wouldn't they be here in the UK?
I think the biggest issue, though, for us is that you can't allow social media companies to decide what to regulate and what's harmful. And I think that's been the big issue because there are so many people, whether it's women, misogyny, whether it's young people, that this doesn't sort of take into account. I think child protection safeguarding, especially as a parent, I'm talking as a mother, is something that I'm really worried about. I don't think this bill actually goes far enough, and I want to see much more protections. But yeah, of course, but I've had to block 700 accounts. I've had to report to Twitter what I think constitutes as harmful, and I'm then told that actually it's not. I mean, I think there's got to be also a regulator where people can make a complaint. At the moment, people feel very powerless because they feel that they can be treated as and how social media companies are allowing people to use their platforms, and actually women are bearing the brunt of that.
I suspect that every single one of us around this table, to varying degrees as well, has experienced some pretty horrible online abuse. There's nothing nice about it. There's no defence of the people who send that. I think the onus is then even more on us to talk about that very difficult balance we have to strike, that something can be harmful and hurtful and rude and disgusting and should have no place in public life. It doesn't always mean it's illegal. Now, if it is illegal, if we're talking about death threats, if we're talking about inciting violence, thankfully in this country we have laws to deal with that.
Of course, not if people are anonymised.
But if we're
how do the police follow it up?
But you can report those things to the police. It is considered to be illegal, and you can get the top minds in the country ideally on that. What you cannot do is start chipping away at even the most disgusting forms of freedom of speech because we find it harmful and we don't like it. It's horrible, but you can't chip away at those fundamental rights.
We must remember that, female confidence in the police is at an all-time low at the moment, given a number of cases that we've seen. I need to mention the name Sarah Everard, and, everyone around the room is just sort of nodding away. But it's not always easy for women to come forward and report crimes that may be seen as not so important, or, they may be exaggerating things or taking things the wrong way. And that's often what I've heard when speaking to a number of women who've come forward to share their stories. They're not taken seriously, essentially. I mean, women aren't taken seriously when they even report issues like domestic abuse and sexual abuse, let alone getting a tweet that you found extremely harmful and offensive. So we need to draw some sort of line.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I couldn't agree with you more. And that's a problem with our institutions and our systems that very often don't take women seriously. That can be in the hospital when it comes to pain. It can be in the police.
There needs to be that accountability
within the police. But then why on earth, given the fact that we don't have this kind of belief in it, would you actually want to empower those institutions to decide over you as the individual what is harmful and what they're going to process?
I want to get Nikki's thoughts on the idea of limiting free speech and the danger of an anonymity online being a requirement doing that.
Well, I don't think, as I say, I think there are some brave campaigns about anonymity in certain jurisdictions. There is an argument for that. But I think what this bill is more about is asking the platforms to live up to the terms and conditions that they set. If we say now, and actually sometimes what is harmful offline in the so-called real world is not illegal or deemed to be harmful online. And, the power of social media, why would we allow this online platforms now to have such influence and reach and not ask them to follow the same rules that they would if they were organising something, offline? And so this is about behaviour. It's about asking the companies to live up to the terms and conditions that they say that they are setting, so that when people do make a complaint or the police want to investigate something, those platforms cooperate and give over information in order to bring a successful prosecution. And that's what is not always happening at the moment.
All of this highlights the deep flaws in big tech, in the police,
Absolutely.
in our institutions, but none of this solves the problem. You cannot solve the problem by making it easier to prosecute people who haven't actually broken the law. That is dangerous for every single individual, including ourselves. I mean,
but that's not what the bill is seeking to do. The
Big
bill
Brother Watch did a fantastic.
There is no regulation. There is no regulation of these platforms at the moment. It's not a question of saying actually how far the regulation. That will be part of the debate, but there isn't any regulation.
Big Brother Watch did a fantastic. I don't even know what you call it. Maybe a promo looking at some of the tweets of MPs showing how they will be flagged. They will be taken offline. Elected representatives because they are legal but harmful. This is a threat to every individual, and there's serious issues here, right? I don't doubt that,
and
but I don't think we've come up with the solution.
We will be debated in Parliament.
We will be debated in Parliament. We'll see the details of that bill when they are published on Thursday.